The origin of the Hmong people is unknown. However, many scholars believe that they originated in the Mesopotamia region and gradually migrated to the Hebei province in northern China. Over 5,000 years ago, the Hmong were living in China long before the Chinese. Around 2700 BC, they were governed by the legendary warrior Chief Qi Yu.
Qi Yu is the Chinese pronunciation. The Hmong pronunciation really means Zi Yao. Zi means father. Yao is grandfather. Now, there was 3 groups, and the Hmong were one group, and the other 2 groups end up being the modern day Han Chinese today. And there was a big battle, and the 2 groups combined forces and fought, and Ziya's group lost.
Qi Yu was captured in 2704 BC and was executed. His body cut into 9 pieces, which were then scattered into 9 separate mounds so that the Hmong people would never be reunited. 1,000 years after the death of Qi Yu, the Hmong formed a second kingdom called Sung Miao, which means us Hmong. Once again, the Chinese invaded, and the Hmong were defeated and nearly exterminated. The Hmong then dispersed, most migrating southward into the lower reaches of the Yellow River to Yunnan province. Between 704 and 223 BC, the Great Hmong Kingdom of Chu existed in Yunnan. During a war that lasted 200 years, the Great Kingdom fell to Chinese rule. All known Hmong books were burned, and those who dared use the Hmong language were punished by death. Hmong of those days are said to have had blonde hair and blue eyes, which was how they were easily identified and killed. Hmong history was preserved into pictorial quilts known as Pang Dao. In 1615, the Chinese began building a 100-mile-long Great Wall in the west to block out Hmong rebellions from Baojiang to Tongren. It was known as the Southern Great Wall. Not willing to subject to Chinese rule, many of the Hmong migrated south to Vietnam, Laos, and Burma in search for a new life of peace. Hmong means free people. Before the Vietnam War, Hmong were known as Miao. The term Miao means barbarian.
A Hmong person would never call another Hmong person Miao, regardless if they are from here or from China. It's only outsiders who are not Hmong themselves call the Hmong people Miao. And the term Hmong sort of just got into use since the war, when there was I think a newspaper or a magazine writer, and he kept referring the Hmong as Miao, and one of the Hmong person that he was interviewing was Dr. Yang Dao, and Dr. Yang Dao asked that he not call the Hmong people Miao anymore, and he started he asked that he call them Hmong.
During the Vietnam War, the CIA recruited the Hmong to fight against the impending communist armies. The Hmong were trained in guerrilla warfare and were led by Major General Vang Pao. Their 2 main objectives were to first block the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was the main supply route for the North Vietnamese, and secondly, to rescue American pilots who had been shot down. In May of 1975, following the collapse of Vietnam and Cambodia, the North Vietnamese army allied with the Pathet Lao to overthrow the existing government of Laos. Major General Vang Pao and many of his staff were flown to safety, but the rest of the Hmong were left to fend for themselves. The Hmong were then targeted by the Pathet Lao for genocide. Many were killed or forced to labor camps for re-education, never to be seen again. Others took to the mountains, where they continued to fight. However, the NVA bombed and gassed the Hmong from air. Many of the Hmong people then attempted the difficult journey to Thailand. They traveled under the cover of darkness, bringing with them only the clothes on their back. The Hmong lucky enough to make it to Thailand were put into refugee camps. Despite the cruel condition of these camps, the Hmong had no other place left to go. There has never been any immigrant group that has suffered as much as the Hmong have as a result of their service to the United States government. Today, the Hmong are more dispersed than ever. Many have settled in the United States, Australia, and Europe, where they continue to preserve their culture, language, and customs.
We were this group of people who have always been displaced from place to place, and now we're in this country, and this is probably the first time in our history where we have the greatest opportunity to have equality like everyone else.
It's an ethnic group that lives in China, North Vietnam, northwestern part of Vietnam, northern part of Laos, northern Thailand, pieces of Burma. So it's scattered over a large area.
The Hmong are people who do not have a country.
It originated from China, and they're people with a really fascinating and unfortunately understudied history.
Well, I don't know too much about Hmong people, but there is a big Hmong population where I come from.
The Hmong people are people who just are struggling a lot.
Our main objective in this project was to try and voice out what was going on in Laos and Thailand today with all the massive killings and atrocities and rapes and murders. And during this process we stumbled across a problem, and that was that no one really knew about the persecution because no one really knew who the Hmong were.
I don't know much about them. I know like it's an Asian race.
What I know about the Hmong people, I know that they live in the upper highlands of Laos.
I know that like a lot of Hmong people don't have a set like place, like they don't have a set country.
Ethnic Hmong people are a highland tribe that lives in southern China, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Burma, and Thailand. They arrived in Laos from southeastern China in the late 18th to early 19th century and settled as farmers in the mountainous north. The Hmong social organization is clan-centered, and they live, for the most part, in small villages in the northern and central parts of the country, many of them only accessible by footpath or small treks. In the wake of warfare, the Hmong were recruited by the CIA in the mid-1960s under the supervision of General Vang Pao to fight against communist forces including the Viet Minh and the Pathet Lao. The Hmong armies, also known as the Secret Guerrilla Unit, was assigned to protect U.S. radar satellites, prevent the ongoing flow of artillery through the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and rescue fallen American pilots. Up until 1975, a record of 30,000 Hmong combatants died as a result of war itself. This is not including the deaths of many men, women, children, and elders who have died as a result of starvation, relocation, fleeing, and bomb attacks. Former Director Edgar Pott Buell of the U.S. Agency for International Development Relief Programs in northern Laos told a reporter of how quickly Hmong men were losing their lives. He quotes, 30% of the kids were 14 years old or less, and about a dozen were only 10 years old. Another 30% were 15 or 16. The rest were 35 or over. Where were the ones in between? I'll tell you, they're all dead. The Hmong could not foresee the many more tragedies that would meet them halfway while fleeing to safety. After the pullout of American forces in 1975, higher Hmong officials and close relatives left from Laos to America. The remaining Hmong, involved or not involved in the war, were left with limited choices. Run back into the mountainous region remaining in Laos, find a way to cross the Mekong River to seek refuge in Thailand, or surrender to the communist Lao forces. Majority of the Hmong that chose to go to Thailand were eventually registered to resettle in offering countries that were willing to take them in. Today, the Hmong lives as a diaspora people residing in America, Australia, Canada, France, South America, China, Thailand, Laos, Burma, and Vietnam. Today, the Lao PDR continues to pursue the complete eradication of the Hmong people in the jungles. According to Amnesty International, regular violent attacks by the LPDR military around and on Hmong encampments and their inhabitants have led to numerous deaths, injuries, and continual displacement. Frequently, attacks on Hmong encampments occur when Hmong people search for food. As the Hmong in the jungle venture for food, moving further away from their encampments, they become more vulnerable to attacks. Amidst food shortages and malnourishment, the Hmong in the jungles have no access whatsoever to basic services, including education, healthcare, or sanitation. Because there's a shortage of healthcare, children among men and women suffer from bloated bellies, bleached hair, and body deformations. Hmong victims suffering from scars, injuries, bullets, and shrapnel wounds have no way to obtain or receive any medical treatments as well. As of January 2009, Thailand and Laos have come to an agreement to repatriate more than 5,000 Hmong refugees from Hoi Nam Khao into Laos by the end of this year. Over the years, Thailand has been receiving many fleeing Hmong from Laos into their overcrowding camps. The refugee camps in Thailand are surrounded by barbed wires, confining the Hmong refugees in living situations with limited freedom, shortages of clean water, and a lack of medical care. The only medical advisory available and allowed in the camps is Medical Sans Frontières, also known as Doctors Without Borders. Both Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have called upon Thailand to stop the repatriation of Hmong refugees. Because if sent back, they would be at risk of severe human rights violation, possibly persecution. Thailand is also very aware that there are 4 current countries that have agreed to resettle the Hmong. Yet Thailand objects to this solution, suggesting that the only solution is to send them back to Laos. Even more concerning to the international world is the Thai government's refusal to allow independent monitoring of the repatriation of the Hmong to Laos.
A student body can only be powerful when it works as one, when it has unity. In 2006, Hmong American students at UW-Madison strongly felt that what was going on overseas was not heard here in America at all, when everything overseas had everything to do with America. These students, who soon created Hmong Human Rights, a committee under HASA, were speaking of the atrocities in Laos and in Thailand. It would be their aunts and uncles, their brothers and sisters that were deprived of their human rights. It's most crucial for all of us to have support for one another in times like this, when we all feel helpless to the situation.
What will break us apart is if we stop caring, if we stop looking and asking. We must, as the next generation, rise up to challenge social issues that are wrong in our eyes. Quietly among us, there is a rising movement, and in no time it will trigger the eyes and ears of the world and capture your attention, emotion, and passion. It's simple, really. All you have to do is care. We can all afford a moment away from our busy lives to care. Do this now by talking to people, by writing to your representatives, and by updating yourself on the situations.
có lo tiếng gấu cha dùa rong tàu bóng gấu lì giờ sau qua sáp lô đa đa tu cha sống sai rùa rùa plau hậu bự tròn ra đua phi lo giòn sai gấu rùa gấu mong có rong tan trò thia thia có gì có nia gấu nó đã chỉ na yua thia lý mùa có tu rong tao chỉ bao thua lành từ bỏ lo yang khô gấu chúa chê gió có lời gió sai chế tao chua lên tia sĩ gió căng trào ly cho trái sai lời chế chúa gió tao y tu lo gió tuôn ta tu uốn rồng gáo chạp lời lo sợ chân dài gáo chúa gáo mong gió tao giòn dài gáo chúa chê họ ba mùa lù xia rồng rong lo khoa có lăng từ bỏ lúa chúa cha thiết chúa khua bé tu men dài gáo chúa sông nó rồng cao tia tia sai chế tao chua lên tia sĩ gió căng trào ly cho trái sai lời chế chúa gió tao y tu lo gió tuôn ta tu uốn rồng gáo chạp lời lo sợ chân dài gáo chúa gáo mong gió tao giòn dài gáo chúa chê họ ba mùa lù xia rồng rong lo khoa có lăng từ bỏ lúa chúa cha thiết chúa khua bé tu men dài gáo chúa sông nó rồng cao tia tia
phong lòng phú cha cha dù phú hao lù cho nhà cao rong dù chi tôn thái tơ thìa vì bé một chia hoa tìa sẽ lù chi ba kia tàu lên nó cho nó bé châu trò nó bé châu trò nó bé châu trò hao lù mua đâu mà mua đu nó nhỏ bé nu trò chính chi cho đã trò lu cho lâu nó cho chia còn thương trao nắng chia people to go in le kulu go kulu sia ya jun chi to go kulu go kulu du chan tu di bi yo po go
There are no American combat forces in Laos. We have been providing logistical support and some training for the neutralist government in order to avoid Laos falling under communist domination. As far as American manpower in Laos is concerned, there are none there at the present time on a combat basis. We do have aerial reconnaissance. We do have perhaps some other activities. I won't discuss those other activities at this time.
while the North Vietnamese forces grew from 7 to 70,000. These tribal forces up in the country that were supported by CIA, not the Royal Lao Army, which stayed right down in the comfortable valley and almost never heard a shot fired in anger, but the forces supported by CIA held that increased force off for about 10 years. Now, I think that's a pretty good record.
Chỉ